When people imagine life in the military, they picture courage, honor, and sacrifice. But behind the uniform lies a dark side filled with pain, fear, and horrors they rarely show. I was stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, a base known for its intense training and endless regulations. It was my first assignment, and I was eager to prove myself. I had no idea that what would haunt me the most wouldn't be the training or the stress, but a moment of complete, soul-piercing silence. In the far corner of the base, there was a place known as the Holdover Barracks. It was the waiting room of the forgotten, where soldiers were kept if they were being medically discharged, dropped from training, or awaiting administrative action. There was no mission or structure, just time, lots of time. I ended up there temporarily after a training injury, a sprained ankle that pulled me from the field for 2 weeks. I hated every minute of it. The atmosphere was heavy, not like depression, exactly more like rot, the kind that infects everything slowly, invisibly. The rooms were sterile but smelled like mildew. The walls were beige, the paint cracked, the kind of place that makes your thoughts louder. There was a guy there, we'll call him Private Jensen. He was injured in the field, just like me. But unlike me, his injuries weren't visible. He barely spoke to anyone. Sat on his bed most days, staring out the window, smoking the same half-burnt cigarette until it burned his fingers. People said he'd been there too long, and something about his paperwork being held up. Typical military red tape. But it was obvious he was unraveling. You could see it in his eyes. They didn't blink right. His hands twitched. He hadn't shaved in weeks. And he started muttering to himself, not always words, sometimes just sounds, groans, whispers. One morning, I was brushing my teeth in the shared latrine when the fire alarm started blaring. But it wasn't a drill as people started yelling. Someone burst into the bathroom and shouted, "He jumped." We all ran outside, and there he was. Jensen, sprawled across the concrete in front of the building, face down. A dark pool formed beneath him, spreading unnaturally wide. It didn't look real. It looked staged, like something out of a training video. But then I saw his hand twitching. Once, and then nothing. He'd climbed onto the roof sometime before sunrise, quietly. Nobody saw him. Nobody stopped him. And he jumped. We stood there in our PT gear, frozen. No one moved. One guy vomited, while another lit a cigarette with trembling hands. We didn't know what to do, because no one had trained us for this. The response was cold, methodical. The suicide response team showed up. The building was cordoned off. We were told to remain inside and not speak to anyone about it. A chaplain gave a brief, awkward talk later that afternoon. There was no ceremony, no investigation we ever heard about. His name was never mentioned in formation again, just gone, as if he'd never existed. They cleaned up the blood with bleach and power hoses. By the next morning, the spot looked as if nothing had happened, but I still see it. Every single time I walk past that patch of pavement, I still see it. People think war is hell, but they forget waiting for war or waiting to be forgotten by the very system you served can be just as deadly. I kept thinking, why didn't we see it coming? But that's the thing you never do. Not in the military, because showing weakness, that's the one sin they don't forgive. Jensen never cried. He never asked for help. He didn't lash out or beg. He just folded in on himself day by day. He was wearing the same uniform we all wore, eating the same garbage chow, laughing sometimes even. But something behind his eyes was already gone, and we ignored it because it was easier, because admitting he was broken meant admitting any of us could be. After the incident, the command tried to spin the story. They told us, "It's tragic, but these things happen." Like it was an accident, like he tripped and fell off the roof instead of dragging himself up there at 5 a.m. just to escape the silence. There were rumors he had put in for mental health counseling months ago. They said the paperwork had gotten lost, that his discharge status delayed access to therapy. They said a lot of things. None of it brought him back. What no one tells you is that once you become non-deployable, you're treated like defective equipment. You're no longer a soldier in training, but a liability, a box to check, a case to close. You just sit, in limbo, waiting for a system that moves like molasses to decide what to do with you. And every day that passes, a piece of you gets quieter, until finally, there's nothing left. The thing that still haunts me most, that I was just 2 bunks down from him, 2 bunks, and I never said a word, not once. We shared silence like it was routine. But now, I replay those silences in my head. I wonder if I'd just said, "Hey man, you good?" Would it have mattered?
No contacts forward about 4 miles. Roger.
In the military, precision is everything. But sometimes precision fails. And when it does, people die. I was deployed overseas, part of a drone surveillance unit. My job was straightforward, which is to monitor live feeds, track targets, and confirm coordinates. We were eyes in the sky, invisible and untouchable. But that day made me wish we were blind. A report came in. Suspected militants gathering near a compound. High-value target. An airstrike was greenlit. I zoomed in. The compound didn't look hostile. Homes, parked cars, and a playground. Children were playing in the yard. Something was wrong. I flagged it to my superior. He didn't even blink. "These are the orders. Proceed." I hesitated again. "You sure?" He snapped. "That's the chain of command. You're not here to question." So I relayed the strike coordinates. Seconds later, the feed went dead. When it came back, the compound was gone. It was flattened. Only it wasn't a base. It was a school. And the playground, ash and limbs. No one spoke. No one moved. The ops room, normally buzzing, went ice cold. No sirens, no scrambling, just silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Then came the cleanup, not of debris, but of accountability. Command called it collateral damage, a tragic necessity. The target was in the area, they said. We followed protocol, but I knew, we all knew. I remember sitting in my bunk that night, staring at my hands. I kept thinking, those coordinates passed through me, through my mouth, my fingers. My voice helped pull the trigger. They told us not to talk about it, citing operational security, warning us not to engage with the media, and ordering us to stick to the official statement. They swept it under the rug like it was paperwork. They buried those children in silence. I tried to speak to a counselor, but they gave me a checklist, asked if I had suicidal thoughts, then told me to stay focused on the mission. There was no therapy, no support group, just another shift in the ops room the next day. That night, I couldn't sleep. I saw their faces every time I closed my eyes. They were not crying, just staring, like they knew I watched and did nothing. I started hearing static in the drone feed, even when it wasn't there. I started flinching at sudden noises, got obsessed with cross-checking coordinates, even after the fact. One time, I snapped at an officer during a briefing. He pulled me aside and said, "You're too soft for this line of work." Why? Because I didn't want to vaporize a school again. And the officer who signed off on the strike, he was promoted and given a commendation for what they called decisive leadership under pressure. And me, I became a ghost in the unit, just another silent drone jockey with a haunted stare. I found out later the school had submitted their coordinates for deconfliction weeks earlier, but the paperwork was lost in transmission. No one was blamed, no reforms were made, and no changes to protocol. Just more missions, more targets, and more silence. The guilt didn't fade, it calcified. I started drinking alone in the barracks, staring at old footage, trying to find some sign I missed, anything that could make it less my fault. But the truth is, I saw the school, I knew what it was, and I said nothing loud enough to stop it. They train us to follow orders, not to think, not to feel, because thinking makes you hesitate, and hesitation gets people killed. But what happens when obedience kills more than it saves? What do you do with that kind of burden? The military taught me how to spot threats from 30,000 feet, but it didn't teach me how to live with myself after I became one. We called it an error, an accident, but deep down, we knew it was worse. It was indifference, systemic and inevitable. A machine built to flatten nuance and sometimes schools. I still hear the laughter before the strike. I still see the cloud of dust swallowing them whole. And when people thank me for my service, I want to ask, if I told you what I really did, would you still say that? The Vietnam War wasn't just fought in rice fields or bombed out villages. It was a war that got inside you. And sometimes, the real danger wasn't the enemy hiding in the trees. It was the man sleeping in the tent next to you. We were just kids, thrown into hell with rifles, heat rash, and orders barked by men who saw us as numbers. Some commanders were reckless, others were cruel. The one we had, he was both. He sent us into ghost zones, areas already cleared, no intel, no point, just meat for the grinder. When good men started dying, the whispers started. Frustration, then anger, then the kind of silence that means something's coming. Fragging, short for fragmentation grenade, but it meant something colder, which is murdering your own officer. Then one night, boom, his tent lit up like someone dropped the sun on it. No alarms, no gunfire, no enemy. The report claimed there was enemy contact and that the tent was hit during a firefight, filed, then forgotten. But we knew. Fragging wasn't rage, it was a decision, and the fallout was instant. Trust died and officers started sleeping with their rifles. We stopped looking each other in the eye. You've never felt paranoia until you're surrounded by men with loaded rifles, and no one's sure who's next. Some guys drank themselves stupid. Others cleaned their weapons for hours, like they were trying to scrub the gilt off the metal. You come home, but the war doesn't stay behind. It moves in with you. Sleep under your bed, whispers through the air vents. You don't talk about fragging. You say things like, "It was tough. We lost good men. We followed orders." But deep down, you remember the sound of the pin, that click, that final choice. Fragging broke more than the chain of command. It broke the illusion that we were the good guys, that this war had rules, that we were still us. Officially, 800 fragging cases. Unofficially, thousands, buried in paperwork, edited and erased. Because what's worse than the enemy shooting at you and a brother aiming from behind? The jungle felt different after, colder, heavier, like it knew what we did. Some said it saved lives, others called it murder. Most never spoke of it again. But I remember, I always will. Sometimes I wonder, could we have stopped it? Or was it always going to happen? A grenade not thrown at a man, but in the system. Because they never taught us what to do. When leadership becomes the threat, and when fear turns inward, you stop looking for enemies in the jungle and start watching your own shadow. The war didn't end when we came home. It just got quieter. Fragging wasn't the disease. It was a symptom of something rotting from the inside. A war too long, a command too blind, and men who'd seen too much to stay human. Sometimes the enemy wears your uniform, because in Vietnam, the fight wasn't always with the Viet Cong. Sometimes it was with your own thoughts. The way they whispered when everything else was quiet. The way the jungle listened back. The war ended, or so they said. We packed up, shipped out and came home. But I didn't feel home, because the jungle, it came with me. It's still on my walls, still in my skin. The first week back, I couldn't sleep unless I kept a flashlight on. Not because I was scared of the dark, but because the dark reminded me of that 1 second before the blast, before his screams stopped mid-syllable, before the air filled with meat and fire and silence. I stopped looking in mirrors, because sometimes when I did, I didn't see myself. I saw him, the officer. His mouth was wide. His hands reached for something that wasn't there. He knows what I did. After a while, I got a job. I did what they told you to do, which is to move on, be proud of your service. But I couldn't forget the sound of the pin, that click, that sharp, metallic goodbye. I met one of the guys from my unit at a diner. We drank coffee and didn't talk about what happened until we finally did. "You remember that night?" he asked. "Which one?" I said, lying. But he knew I knew, and I knew he knew. And for a moment, we just stared, and in the silence, I swear, I heard the grenade again. We don't confess. We actually don't need to, or see it in each other's eyes. Sometimes I go to the VA, not for help, just to be around others who lie the same way. They don't talk either. But if you listen close, you can hear the pin drop in their silence. I think about that officer. Wondered if he had kids, if they still believe what the report said. Killed in action, enemy mortar fire. Would they still salute that flag if they knew we killed him? Would they know we had to? Or would they call us monsters? Because fragging doesn't just kill a man. It kills everything else. It kills your soul, your sleep, and your reasons. His name's not on the wall. Ours aren't either. But I go anyway, and I whisper his name. Not to apologize, but to remind myself that someone should remember what we did. How we fought with our last blood when the real war started. The one that wasn't fought in the jungle, but inside our heads. Sometimes the war doesn't end when you come home. It just moves into your bedroom. These stories are more than just accounts of war. They're echoes of pain, fear, and broken trust. They remind us that the scars of battle don't always fade with the end of the fight, and behind every soldier's uniform lies a human being carrying unseen battles, and sometimes the hardest war is the one within. If these stories moved you, share them, because the truth deserves to be heard. Thank you for listening. Stay safe and stay aware.